Hello, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that story you're familiar with, I'm sure, about feeding of the 5,000 with just 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. It's a story well known, and I used to have an older man come into the parish I served previously who said, I really would like to hear you talk about that great story of mine just about loafing and fishing. Well, that's not exactly what I think it means, but we will see. The setting of the story is that Jesus has just heard that his mentor, his cousin, colleague, the one who prepared the way for him, John the Baptist, has been executed, beheaded by the terrible ruler Herod, who had made this drunken promise to his wife during a party that he'd watched her daughter dance. It broke, I'm sure, Jesus' heart. And he'd been working all day when he heard about it, and so it just says that when he heard this, he wanted to withdraw out into the sea, to just be alone with his disciples in the boat. And there he was, praying, mourning, reflecting, giving thanks. Well, after a while had gone by, the crowds began to gather, they noticed on the shore, and Jesus said, it's time to go in now, and we'll talk to them. And it said that he brought healing to them. I'm sure mainly healing and peace of mind, and perhaps even some body healings as well. But now it was time for supper. He was tired, the disciples were tired, and Jesus said, well, let's eat and let's feed them as well. The disciples said, well, how can we feed them? We only have, 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. So the story says he blessed it, gave it to them. They distributed to the 5,000 people, plus women and children. You know, they only counted men in those days. And they had over 12 baskets left. What do you make of this story? Well, fish is a very important symbol in scriptures, as well as long before in other pagan religions, as well as the symbol of bread. Fish was like the symbol of our coming down into earth, the darkness of earth, swimming in the evolutionary waters of life until we grow up and return to our home. The bread was also an important symbol because the bread was like the life, not just of the body, but it had that symbolic meaning of the understanding of the mind, the bread that we feed our souls and hearts so that we can gain understanding of liberation and of our oneness with God. Now, in ancient times, the bread and the fish were important symbols in the zodiac sign of Pisces. Pisces occurs during the month of the winter solstice. And so in those darkest days in the northern hemisphere, they portrayed it, when they looked at the zodiac, they saw these 2 fish in sort of a horizontal and a vertical sign as coming down into the darkness of earth, and they told people that's our own spirits choosing to come here. And then, as the story goes, they had to swim away from the terrible monster in the Nile, which was symbol of, maybe the parallel with the story of Jesus and his parents having to flee into Egypt. But we could say it's our then journey back to the promised land, not through the Nile, but through the Jordan River, crossing over into the land of milk and honey in Canaan. Now, when we get there, it relates to the other 5-month cycle, which leads us to the Easter, or the spring equinox, which is what? The time of awakening, the time of understanding that we are not our darkness, we're not these bodies, but that we are spirits, one with the Creator of God, one of these parts of many, but we're all one. It's a freeing, liberating journey. The 5 months through the deserts, through the struggles, the 40 days till we come to it again. Now, every one of us, I believe, has to take that journey. We're all part of that 5,000 that are hungry, long to be fed. And through the coming into our hearts and minds of the message of who we really are, not just lost in this dark sea of life and worry and murder and all of the fear that goes on and guilt in this world, but through understanding that we can let that go and be ourselves. That's the bread of life. That's the words of Jesus saying, change your thinking, the presence, the kingdom, the reign is within you. No, it takes us hard time to realize that, and it's a long journey before it sinks in and we can begin to live it. And we do that in some of the models that Jesus gave us. Withdrawing to quiet, lonely places each day in meditation, in prayer, in kind service acts to others, and feeding them too the bread of life until they hopefully understand it as well. Taking up our crosses each day, swimming that river, and it gets pretty fierce and rough at times, but that's our call. That's our journey back home again. Now, when we get there, there's some signs that we might be sharing. There's signals along the way. Joy, peace, kindness, forgiveness. Forgive us, O Lord, our debts as we forgive our debtors. We learn to live that, not hold grudges, but show kindness and compassion, because knowing nobody can hurt spirit. Oh, yes, the body they may hit and pound and bruise and kill, but the spirit is eternal. It is forever. It's always who we are. And we keep telling ourselves and practicing that, forgiving others, doing acts of kindness, and it begins to sink in. 40 days, 40 years, a whole lifetime, but it keeps growing, and the joy's there. And one of the signs of that in forgiveness is that we share it with the world. People whom we always thought and judged as being unworthy, perhaps of our presence, of our goodness, even of our religion. Here Jesus has them feed all these 5,000 non-Jewish, non-Orthodox folks in this northern area of Galilee, the food that they were eating. A sign of love of ourselves, in the deepest sense, is our love for all people, the people that we had judged unclean and unworthy. We do it in our organizations all the time today. A friend of mine years ago, Tom Bandy, said, the church needs to get beyond its membership sense of myness. We own this, and give it away to the world. He says, we talk about my pastor, my hymns, my music, my kind of form and liturgy, and we just let the outside world go. He says we need to listen. We need to connect. And instead of charging, he said, members to or non-members to use the church, he said we ought to turn it around. Charge the members, but don't charge the non-members. Let them use it for weddings, for baptisms, for parties. And he said we will be blessed with people coming in and wanting to know, where do you get all that generosity and all that kindness? Oh, if just 12 or 15, 20 people capture that vision, capture that excitement, experience that peace, well, it can have a salting effect on a world which becomes quite bitter and angry and weary. You and I can be that. We can be that Christ. We can be that Jesus for our time. That's what we're to be. Not just trying to emulate and be like him, but to live as he would live in our day and time. So the message of the story of the 2 fish and the 5 loaves of bread and feeding the 5,000, which represent the whole world, is a message for us. Go and be the big fish and give out freely the bread of life. God bless you as you do it, recognizing the divine within you as you honor and recognize it in others as well. Namaste.